please. Not now. Thanks. So, welcome to the session entitled Moving to Deeper Value in Understanding the Intersection of Resilience Disciplines. Before I introduce your presenter, I just want to mention that if you have any question, there will be time at the end of the session. Now, a bit of background on Garth Tucker and Nancy Holloway-White. Mr. Tucker currently serves as Director of Business Continuity at ESO in Toronto. He's seasoned resilience management professional with more than 20 years of experience. He has responded to many crises over the years, including the 2003 electricity failure in Ontario that involved the loss of power, to millions of homes and businesses. Until recently, Mr. Tucker was a member of DRI Canada's Board of Directors. For Nancy Holloway-White, she's currently the president of DRI Canada and senior manager of process effectiveness and initiative at President's Choice Financial in Toronto. She is a leader in risk management, specializing in internal controls, process and governance, and as an additional specialization in business continuity. Mrs. Holloway-White has served as DRI Canada's president since 2020. Please join me in welcoming Garth Tucker and Nancy Holloway-White.
This is how we advance the slides?
Perfect.
Oh, wrong button.
Maybe the top green one? This one?
There we go. All right, sweet. So I'll let Nancy introduce herself and
Hi, so I'm Nancy Holloway-White. I didn't introduce myself this morning, I realized. Patrick did such a lovely job, so I'm grateful to be here, and I look forward to a good discussion today. Garth and I have it arranged that we're going to do the first part speaking, and then there's the break, and then we're up for some good debate and discussion after the break. If we don't go the full hour, that's fine, but I see a couple people in the room that might make it that way. Thanks.
oh goody. Hi, my name is Garth. Everybody having a good time at the symposium so far? Yeah. It was so much of an honor to be a part of the planning of this and things like that. And I'm glad to see that it came together and it's been successful, and happy to see so many people and so many people who are not DRI certified.
Yes.
I was shocked, but that's okay, because now you have a chance to go and get DRI certified. So, take the course. Defining resilience. Shut up, Jason. Capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. Now, I know, and resilience is a buzzword. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I won't argue with it. But the way I look at it, it's an umbrella term. I mean, we have to work together with all of the different professions within our, industry, and that's what the whole point of this presentation is. And I'll tell you a little bit about how this came to be. In 2018 or 2019, I was working here in Ottawa, or well across the river in Ottawa, and I went to a meeting with our enterprise risk management folks, and it got very, very bloody. There was a lot of hard feelings and things like that. So, of course, first thing I did was call Nancy, because Nancy talks me down off of ledges all the time, and she's a real good mom like that. And we started to discuss, where the root of all this comes from, because I'm not the only person who's had this experience, dealing with enterprise risk management folks. And so we started to talk about it, and Nancy said, well, a lot of it is because we don't understand what one another do. So we started to talk about how we could, bridge that gap, how we could break down those silos and things like that. And this is where, the genesis of this presentation and article came from. So we've been kicking this around for a while. Now, Nancy will talk a little bit later about her breakthrough and how, we kind of tied everything together and things like that. So, but for the meantime, resilient. I mean, every organization wants to be resilient. We want to be able to absorb shocks. I mean, I had to leave this morning and I missed Anne's presentation about cyber because I had to go and deal with a cyber event. One of our third-party folks that we deal with had a cyber intrusion, And we had to assess the impact on our organization. So, I mean, it happens every day. It was just kind of coincidental that it happened today. But I mean, these are the things that we're dealing with these days. So now, some of the problems that have been experienced or that I've seen is, you know, the things that we don't even think about, it's just because we're in silos. We do our own things, you know, we're so focused on our business continuity or our disaster recovery. Enterprise risk management is so focused on their risk registers, and we don't talk to one another. And we're leaving a lot of value unrecognized because we don't share. And there's a lot of duplicated effort, which is costing, you know, the organization money. And we don't really think about these, or we haven't thought about these things for a long time. And so this makes our programs less effective. So, and you're gonna have to excuse me, I'm still getting over a chest cold here, so my voice is a little harsh. If we're not working together, the machine is not as effective as it could be. So we're missing opportunities to make ourselves better. And if we don't stop and consider these things, we're only hurting ourselves. We're not, you know, making the business better. We're not making our lives better. So, and one of these things is limited communication. I mean, how often do you speak to enterprise risk management? As a disaster recovery coordinator, how often do you speak to the ERM folks? Anybody? Nobody? Nobody talks to them at all? Oh. Yeah. Yeah. Well, the enterprise risk management folks, like, you know, not the incident management, the ERM folks. Because they're the guys who are doing all the insurance type stuff and the actuaries and things like that. Yeah. But, you know, when we think about it, their threats are our threats. We're all facing, we're all working, we all have the same risks. So why, you know, are we working on these independently? And we're coming to our own conclusions and we're not getting other, you know, input on that. And it's a waste of resources. So if we just pool it all together, there we go, lack of resources. This is something that I face every day. Nobody has bandwidth. You know, every time I'm trying to right now complete a BIA. And everybody I talk to, oh, Garth, I don't have time right now. Oh my God, I don't have time. I said, you don't have time to fill out the part 1 of the BIA? It'll take you 2 hours. But this is, you know, a common theme with everybody every day is lack of, you know, budget, skills, whatever the case may be. So, and especially in smaller, because our organization is 800 employees. Now we have offices all through US, here in Canada and in Belfast, but everybody's busy and they're so focused on sales, so focused on whatever, that nobody has time to do their BIA. So that leaves me, you know, having to go, oh, I'm sorry, boss, but it's going to take us 8 months to complete the BIA where it should take 8 weeks. So, you know, this, I see a lot of people nodding, so obviously I'm not the only one. Now, resilient practice areas, business continuity, DR. How many people here consider themselves a business continuity or disaster recovery planner? Yeah, show of hands. Yeah, most of the people here. Yeah, there you go. Now, enterprise risk management. Anybody here in the ERM? Okay. Yeah, we all wear a lot of hats. So, anybody do ORM? You might not think you do, but if you do business continuity, you do risk assessment, so that's operational risk. So there you go. Cyber, everybody does security now if you're in business continuity, but this is becoming its own thing. You know, I report to the CISO. My boss is this, you know, the Chief of Information Security Officer, and he's who directs me because we're a software as a service company, so cyber is huge on our radar. So everything I do, you know, gets pushed from a cyber lens. Emergency management. Anybody here do emergency management? Yeah. Who here thinks that emergency management is just basically business continuity on steroids? Yeah. And any redheaded stepchildren here for OH&S? No, no, good. We can talk all about them.
I'm going to jump in and then add in.
Yep, you go right ahead.
For ERM, so I work in the financial services industry, And this is regulated, right? The Office of Superintendent of Financial Institution, OSFI. So they have a regulation for ERM that follows this guideline, right? And the same for ORM. So ERM in the financial services, insurances world, what they're looking at is they create the principal risks for the organization, which generally, if it's public, they're publicly owned, so traded, right? Then it would be agreed by the board of directors to say that all the risks we're going to address are going to fall under these 10, 11, whatever it is, principal risks. So they'll look at those things, and some of the things to look at is cash flow management. What's the time horizon that our company can carry on? How much do we need to put aside when we're working with Treasury for reserves? They look at a lot of things that some of it don't fall so much into the business continuity, but things that we also think about, right? So this is the enterprise risk management. And then operational risk management is more intuitive. There's also an OSFI guideline that relates to operational risk management, which, side note, maybe we'll discuss this after the break. They've just changed it. They're updating it. Language that includes resilience. So it's the first time we've seen this in OSFI language that is very exciting for a business continuity professional like myself that works in the financial industry. So operational risk management, work last week, I get a message from ORM. We want to talk about an incident that happened because it's an ORE, operational risk event. So we want to dig in, and I'm like, oh gee, this feels an awful lot like business continuity post-incident report. So just resilience practice areas, and back over to Garth.
Thanks, Nancy. Yeah, so, yeah, like the graphic shows, standing alone, we're a lot weaker than if we're all together. And, I think we will make ourselves far stronger if we work, as a group. And if we look at the silos, it's true. For years, I did disaster recovery for many years. I came from IT, backup and recovery, which led me to disaster recovery, which then led me to business continuity. But I didn't even know enterprise risk management existed when I was doing disaster recovery, because I rarely came out of the machine room. And so, it was just, that's what, the math nerds did. So, but it's very much a big part of what I do now. Root cause of resilience silos. And again, like I said earlier, when we talked about it, it comes down to a lack of understanding of what each other do. And so the ERM folks, they just want, it's mine, don't touch it, it's mine. And then the business continuity folks are like, well, I need to know what to do here and there. And so then nobody wants to give up their control or what they perceive as their control. They don't want another boss to report to or, things like that. And so it becomes very much a turf war. And everybody is trying to protect their area, and this is where a lot of this stuff comes from. And if we did a root cause analysis on it, we would quickly determine that it's a lack of understanding of what one another do and how we could work together. Mistrust, again, you're worried that they're going to take away your job, they're going to take away your role. And I find that a lot, especially with DR guys, because they come from an IT background, and IT guys are absolutely the worst to deal with, and I know I can say that freely because I came from that. No, I'm saying it, it's a fact. Older IT guys, especially developers, they don't want to tell you what they know. They don't want anybody to know what they do because they look at it as job security.
Can I jump in?
Certainly.
So,
Yep.
Yeah, we're gonna keep tag teaming here. So the idea of mistrust is not, I'm gonna say intuitive. I'm a little optimistic, and I had to really put some thought behind mistrust. Why? Why would we in workspaces now that are often more collaborative have mistrust between disciplines? So to break down the reasons. And so here's some of them that I'd written down. So organizational cultural includes assumptions, right? So there's assumptions for each risk silo, philosophies and values that hold the organization together. So is it mistrust, or is it working from inherent assumptions about, as Garth had mentioned, what different groups do? Often people are unaware of the influence of organizational cultural thinking on the way they act. So it's unintentional. It's not like I'm proactively mistrusting or not collaborating with my colleague over there. It's just we'll say a lack of appreciation of what they're doing, which Garth also referenced, right? So sometimes when parties try to collaborate across organizations, they violate the unspoken rules. Like, that makes sense to me about that mistrust component. Unfamiliarity or lack of relationships among key players. We know how when you know someone or have a working relationship, it gets so much easier to have real conversations. You get past, the initial how do you speak, how do we speak, and then you get down to a deeper level, right, if you have a positive relationship. So I think that's part of it, because often, in my case, right, we're in different areas of the building. I don't encounter them in the CAF or whatever the case may be. I have to go to my way. Background and expertise. When I started out, the ERM group, they're a very smart group. They're so is this group. So is business continuity, right? People that have doctorates in math, actuaries, those types of things. So understanding and appreciating where they come from is really helpful. And then also vice versa, them giving the business continuity industry we'll say, respect of understanding, deep expertise here as well. So that's another element. And then withholding information, as Garth had referenced, isn't intentional, just not understanding how this piece of information would really help another group. Maybe, in some cases, depending on the industry, sensitive information. So in the banking world, you operate on the principle of least privilege, meaning you give someone all the information they need to do their job, but no more, because no more than that, because you're protecting customer data, you're protecting critical infrastructure, banking and so on, and other the energy industry would be the same, right? So that's something else to appreciate when, how much to share information.
So yeah, collaboration, it's a word that gets thrown around a lot, but it's something that we don't really do enough. We don't collaborate. I've been pushing it with the organization I'm with right now, and reached out to our ERM folk. I say folk because it's only one person, and said to her, I said, we need to discuss. I said, I want to, find out what you're doing at your risk register. And I sent her my risk register, and I said, this is what I'm doing. She came back and she goes, wow, you know how to do a risk register? And I go, yeah, okay. And, I learned from Nancy. So, but, it's, again, not knowing what one another do. And so, we've since built a decent working relationship. It's because we do different things. She's very focused on our insurance, aspect. Me, insurance is there, but it's not my primary, focus. Why form a collaborative team? Well, it just makes sense. It's silly not to work together. Even if you don't like the person, you still try and work with them. Now, this is something that, I want to point out. If you'll notice, every single one of practice areas, we all do risk and threat management. So why are we doing this independently? It doesn't make any sense. One, because we're not getting enough views on what the impacts of these risks are. How many people have done a risk assessment with somebody or with a business unit, and they insist that their business unit is the only key business unit in the business, and if they're not available, the whole business is out of control? Because they only have their perspective. Now, if you bring a group together, you'll get many perspectives on it. I personally love doing risk assessments. I love scaring people. I don't know how many people have, oh, you're in the flight path of Pearson Airport. Well, let me tell you a story. So it's interesting, and that's one of the things and this is really the key. And I have to give credit to Nancy, because she's the one who put the bow on this, with risk being the, the thing that ties us all together, and really, kind of put things, in perspective. And if you look, we do share a lot of common things, data, risk, and communications. how many different communications, programs do we need? We only need one. And the problem is most communications folks in the industry and within business have never done crisis communications. They have no idea, what's involved in it. I just went through this with the eclipse because in Texas they're in a state of emergency. And I'm like, is somebody going to send out a notification to staff to say, just stay and work from home? Well, we never really thought about it, Garth. And I go, there's 1 million people coming to the area, so, roads are going to be a little tied up. So, but the communications people, they hadn't thought about this. And that's what our job is to work with them and help them build the communications plans so that they're more effective. So how does this work for our industry? Common data, plans which share responses, incident response, crisis management, communications, facility plans. All of this, is shared. We're not going to have separate plans for OH&S versus business continuity versus disaster recovery. We're all tied together. We're all going to have the same crisis response, or we should. We can't all build our own because that just leads to confusion. How many people here have been through a crisis? Good. Yeah, I expected that many. Because there's a lot of people that I talk to, they've never been through an actual crisis. And, until you have, and I mean, anybody who's been through a crisis will tell you, you look at your plan and go, yeah, okay, and then you start in. But your crisis communications, that is your, lodestone, if you will. It's what guides you through what you're doing. The plans, you got to learn to dance. Your DR plans, those are a little different. But business continuity, it can change, in directions on a dime. Shared data. Business functions are common across the industry, or across the organization. Risk, again, as I pointed out, this is the one thing that, ties us all together. So rather than having 7 different risk assessment processes, which may provide different outputs, we need to work together and have a single risk register across the organization where you can draw from it. We're all drinking from the same well. Shared plans. Again, we don't need separate plans for BC, DR, EM. I mean, they're slightly different, but ultimately, they all have to be tied together. Your disaster recovery, ties into your business continuity. Your business continuity, that ties into your emergency management. Because business continuity, once you dial 911, it's now emergency management. But there's the flashing lights, there's sirens, that's emergency management. And the business continuity guys, we're just sitting back, waiting for direction from police or fire on what we're going to do. This font was awfully small. That must have been mine. Sorry about that. Anyway, communications. Again, I'm not going to spend any more time talking about that. I've already beaten up death. Incident crisis response management. This is something that, a lot of business continuity folks don't really do well. Emergency management, this is their lifeblood. They love, crisis response. Jason and I were talking last night about, in emergency management, you have former police, fire, or military. The police, they want to hit somebody with a stick. Fire people want to put water on it, and the military guys want to blow stuff up. So it's interesting how they do things, but they invented ICS. That comes from fire. And it is absolutely the best, way to manage an incident, or IMS, however, what do you want to call it. So I'm going to spend a lot of time here. Okay, starting point, risk. And this is where I'm going to turn it over to Nancy, because she's the risk expert on the team.
So I don't think that Garth's humble, right? This is very much a collaboration. So before we get into some things that are going to raise some eyebrows, hopefully, because that means it's somewhat interesting for the room, a few will say more definition components. So a threat is the potential exploitation of a vulnerability. I think everyone will, that's not really controversial. Everyone's going to agree with that, right? A risk is the potential for loss when the threat happens. Again, I think most risk disciplines are not going to really debate that one too much. I think we're okay. So that's where common ground, threat and risk. After that, things get a lot muddier when we're talking interdisciplinary, right? So we have some groups, like we'll say the ERM, rich data, tons of data, access to data, know how to use it, would provide a very quantitative response. We have other groups in the risk discipline that are going to provide a more qualitative response. I think about Dr. Homer Dixon this morning, who absolutely loved what he had to share, and how his institute, what that complex thinking that they had provided is a culmination, it's a combination of both quantitative and qualitative. And when you get groups that think differently together, you get great outcomes in the long run. So, where else are we? How should we begin to align, right, the organization? Where do we start? So we're thinking about something neutral, a starting place where we can align. So first, I guess we'll address, are risk registers necessary? I think for this room, most people are going to say yes, it's a pretty easy one, but we at least wanted to say, acknowledge the thought. Okay, so a shared party. What's neutral? It's not a risk discipline, project management. It's a planning discipline, in a sense. So could, potentially, these different risk disciplines agree on something that's not any one of their, in essence, definition, and say, for a risk register, we'll start as the project management. And if anyone's familiar with project management, right, they have the project management handbook, the PMBOK, Book of Knowledge. This is their definition taken from the PMBOK. How to create a risk register. Again, let's borrow from somewhere that's neutral space, PMBOK, that potentially all groups work with, right, that we can work together with. Now, if we think about a risk register that multi-disciplines will use, we'll need to, in very tiny spaces, in a very concise wording is what I mean, describe our inherent viewpoint when writing the risk. That in itself would be something to, a hurdle to get past. Because if I write something, someone else in the business continuity industry will probably understand it because they understand my implicit assumptions and knowledge from the get-go, right? From right away, from the starting point. Versus if someone were to pick up something by ORM, maybe they're not going to understand their inherent viewpoint right away. So acknowledging there will be a little bit of that to start. So we each need to be crisp, right? Each risk discipline. And I wrote an example. Rather than describing the risk as power out, explain the likely cause of the future power outage and how it will impact the pertinent stage of the project. If we lose power from the coming thunderstorm, we won't be able to test our machine. It's pretty straightforward. It just requires a bit of context setting. So, sample project management risk register. This is really tiny. Borrowing from, again, project management discipline. Garth, you agreed with this one, so we're good. Okay, so the other thing we get into, which I think there's even debate in our industry, right, is what exactly does the risk formula look like? This is probably the most simplistic one. So I think there could be another whole discussion where we talk about what's the risk formula, what's the right risk formula, what does that look like? We don't propose to say this is the risk formula to use. We're putting out there as a starting point for thought. It's simple. Maybe we go from there. Maybe there's a spin-off conversation about what's the right risk formula that is interdisciplinary in nature. Can we start small together? So this is an Excel spreadsheet, right? This is a risk register. I don't think that as we get into bigger data that it's feasible to do an Excel spreadsheet for multidisciplinary risk register. I think we'll have to end up with some kind of, if we go this route, software where you can have layers and depth, right? But for the very conceptual starting point, I think for people to get their heads around it, it would be just a plain old Excel spreadsheet, right, where you can say, I'm going to start with putting that simple definition that I had said, if there's a power outage, then we can't test our machines, and then start layering on from there. And from there, we can get things more complex and keep digging deeper. The initial risk rating, this goes back to the risk formula. This will be also something to sort out. Maybe, I also want to say that not every row, not every risk that people, different groups list, will be relevant for every discipline. So we'll have to have, you know, as for egos and those types of things, some groups that would say, I appreciate that risk isn't relevant to my discipline, I'm going to skip that one. But I am going to leverage all the information you shared on this risk that is really important to my discipline and that I never thought about it that way before. And because of the different approach and different thought, we end up with a much richer viewpoint at the end. And again, this morning with Dr. Homer Dixon talking, the reason why it was like another aha moment is he's talking about all these different convergence of stressors and thank you, triggers coming together and creating that. And this is a tactical way that we might start to see that. So a big aha moment for me this morning on that. So this is, again, just a blowout of conceptual. The slides will be available after. Who leads the charge?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
We look at it. I'm not sure, like I said, if we're going to have a single right answer to this. I mean, it's going to depend on the organization, how the organization is structured, who's going to run things, who's going to have the, view or, of how everything works. Public sector, EM folks. I don't know, how many people here work in public sector? 2, 3, 4, a few, yeah. I found when I went to work at the City of Regina doing their business continuity stuff. 6 months later, they fired their emergency manager and said, hey, you're it. And I went, well, I guess I can learn to spell emergency management now. And, but I was the person who was responsible for risk within the organization, within the entire City of Regina. And the business continuity folks reported to me, and it was a little confusing for me because I kept siding with them, and then the chief of the fire department on the other side was like, no, Garth, it's this way, because emergency management has, oversight on everything. Whereas in private sector, all they know about emergency management is dial 911. So it's typically a business continuity, but I've also been in organizations where enterprise risk management had oversight on everything related to continuity. So it depends on it, and again, I don't know if we'll have a single right answer anywhere, but OH&S, ERM, and BCDR very rarely work together. How many folks here work collaboratively with other resilience professions? Yeah, a few, yeah, but not a lot. So who should you trust? Now, this is something that's been a bit of a sore point for me. You cannot do a degree in business continuity. You just can't. You can't even do a certificate in business continuity. For now, thank you. But you can take courses, but you can do a degree in emergency management. You can do a master's in emergency management. You can take degrees in PhD, oh, there you go. So, I mean, it's something that, business continuity has no, I mean, we can say that there's a standard, based on, DRI's, professional practice, things like that, but it's not accredited, it's not enforced. I can't, my $2,500 or however much it costs now to take the BCLE course, I can't write that off of my taxes. So apparently Jason's accountant found a way, but I think he works for the mob as well. So, but I couldn't write it off, and I questioned CRA on it, and they said because you're not accredited, because it's not an accredited course. So it's depressing when you think about that, but that we're not taken seriously. But I mean, this is something that DRI is pushing towards, is making it a standard and becoming, a recognized group of people. So, and then if we look at, Disaster recovery. There are dozens of disaster recovery certifications you can take. Some of them are, focused on, actual recoveries. Some are focused on this, and some are actually worthless. You send them $250, they send you a certification. Much like that other BCI group, but just kidding, I shouldn't make jokes like that. But, ORM, you can do that through RIMS, you can get a certification, and it's recognized, things like that. ERM, of course, they have their certifications as well. I'm doing a course right now to write my CRM, my certified or Canadian Risk Management designation. And OH&S, of course, they're probably the most tightly regulated group through the Canada Labour Code. I make fun of the OH&S people all the time, but they are actually, they're very, very important to organizations. They keep us safe. And I don't know, is there a security designation? Can somebody answer that question for me? Yeah. There is? Okay.
Yeah, they do CPP certified, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
What's it, certified something professional?
Certified protection professional.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's one of them, and there's another one as well. They have a few.
Physical security.
Oh, okay, there we go.
Thank
Yeah.
you very much.
But again, you see, they have recognized designations and they have education, things like that. So something that we don't have. BC is kind of like on the side of all of these different educational offerings. You take a BC or a business continuity course. And I've, looked at a few of them and go, wow, who wrote that? Because they got it all wrong. So, it's, it's hard to know what to trust and things like that. And this is the thing, a CBCP or an MBCP or even an ABCP, says that, you've learned this amount of stuff. But most HR folks, they don't know what that is. They don't know the difference between an ABCP and a CBCP. An ABCP, it's a fine designation. I'm not denigrating it. But, you don't have the experience that an MBCP has. So HR folks need to know the difference. When you're hiring an MBCP versus an ABCP, you're hiring somebody with a significant amount of experience. Like Jason, for instance, who has his MBCP. So, we need to, as I say, we need to agree that this is, a group function. This is not, independent people. We're all working together and it's a resilience program. How do you like that, Jason? So there we go. It's not individual. These are just parts of the overall process. We're just a cog in the machine, and take away the focus from who's in charge, and all work together. So now, questions for the audience, and we'll leave this until we come back after the break, and we'll have a good discussion about it. And one of them would be, should we have a chief resilience officer? We have chief information systems. We have chief information security officers. We have all kinds of chiefs, but we don't have a chief resilience officer. And what risk formula would you use? And I'll leave you with that. Have the break. I'd also, before we stop, I'd like to introduce you to Vaughn Dragland. Could you stand up, Vaughn? Vaughn is the publisher of True North Resilience. He's the guy who he makes it look pretty and makes it all happen. So he's I've known Vaughn for many, many years, and really, really happy that he came on board and helped us produce that magazine. And everybody got a copy? There we go. Yeah, there's copies out there, so go grab one if you don't get one in the mail. And thanks, everybody, and I'll let Nancy close it out.
This is what I mean about Garth being humble. The magazine was his idea, and he's the editor.
No, Vaughn he's the guy who makes the magic happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Not saying otherwise. I just checked the time. We do actually have a little bit of time before break, so we can start with one of the conversations. I think it's nice to segregate, actually, and we'll start with the idea of the CRO, and then after break we can get into the risk formula and some other conversations. So CRO is also Chief Risk Officer, which financial institutions do have. But this is a Chief Resilience Officer, which is a different question. So I think I know the answer. Does anyone work in an organization with an organization that has a Chief Resilience Officer today? Does anyone work in an organization that has a CRO, a chief risk officer? Couple, right? So not only are we not talking about having a chief resilience officer, we don't even have like the common risk officer yet, but at any rate. So should organizations have a chief resilience officer? Do we have thoughts, viewpoints, opinions on that?
I'm going to put Ann Wangowski on the center stage. What do you think, Ann? Because you probably have the most experience in the room here.
Well, I think it really varies depending on the organization and how they manage risk and who owns risk. When you look at most organizations, the CFO is ultimately responsible, but it does get passed around, right? So there's, we talk about operational risk, and, so there's your COO. Does the COO own it? And would an organization create that? We talked a few years ago having a CSO. You see more CSOs now than you used to, but there's no real model, right? It really depends on the corporate culture and the appetite of the organization and how top-heavy they want to be, and how, so for a mid-sized organization, they don't want to have that many executives. Instead, they'll say, here, you own it. Oh, sorry.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Barry.
Oh, okay. Apparently I'm supposed to talk into this thing.
That way we could do that.
So, no, I completely lost my train of thought.
CSO, you were talking about a CSO.
Yeah, so, there's more CSOs out there because security has become more of a concern, right? With the advent of all the cyber attacks and the cyber risks and so on and so forth. But really, it's an evolving landscape. When you looked at how different parts of our industry used to integrate prior to Y2K even, there was a lot of siloing. Post Y2K, business continuity came more to the forefront, and then as things evolved, we started realizing that we should integrate more things, right? So there are things that the, emergency managers look after, which are typically more physically damaging things rather than cyber damaging things, right? So what's the difference between the CSO and whoever owns the emergency management for the organization, or even occupational health and safety? And how do they work together? And how do those incident escalation models come together and culminate in a proper way to manage the incident? But even before you get into managing the incident, if you take that sort of thought train and apply it to risk, how do we manage risk as an organization? When I was thinking earlier about, some of the stuff that Garth was talking about, and, back in the olden days when I did some work for Nortel Networks, when they were in 120 countries and they had 90,000 employees, they used to have a really smart risk management, enterprise risk management function. And they would look at risk in a wide variety of different ways. And I haven't seen that come back together in other organizations in how we're looking at risk and how we're managing risk. So it's, it used to be less siloed, and now it's become more siloed for some reason. And part of one of the things that we do in our day-to-day lives is business resilience and business continuity professionals is try to break down those silos of excellence. So, should we have one or shouldn't we? It depends. It's like implementing SAP. It depends, right? It depends on what you want to do as an organization.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm thinking about that curve we saw at the keynote this morning, right? Resilience and complexity. So We have, now are we too far over on the upside down U in terms of complexity that we have silos and risk disciplines and we go back a bit towards the middle, maybe with collaboration, interdependencies? Something to think about. I'll do a time check. I know it's a little warm in the room. What vote do we want to do? We want to open some doors and take our break a little early? Yes. Okay. No. No. Yeah. Okay. Great. That's okay. You want to keep going? We're good to go out? Okay. We will break a little early, open up the doors, and then we'll rejoin for hopefully a spirited discussion.